to Magic ASMR. If you're new here, please subscribe or follow. In tonight's storytime episode, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 Reddit paranormal stories. I kindly asked 3 Reddit users to let me feature their stories, so I want to thank them all for letting me do so. Let's begin. The first story. Before the following event, I was a non-believer. I am an ICU nurse in France. The ICU ward is made of a long corridor providing access to 4 units of 5 rooms. One night we were talking about ghosts with coworkers, and I stated that they do not exist at all. Around 1 hour later, a patient begins to spit blood, so I go with my coworker to remove the blood out of his mouth with the suction unit. After 5 minutes of suction, the unit stopped. I thought a blood clot was blocking the system. I followed the line to see the clot, and I could see nothing except that the device was turned off. There's a key that we have to switch to turn it on or off. I tried to rationalize the event, but it's not an electrical device, so this function is impossible. Strangely, my coworker told me that I should keep my mouth shut because someone has something to say to me. Later in the same night, 2 patients separated by 2 rooms told us they saw a woman in pink. We all wear white uniforms and no visitors are allowed after 10 p.m. and it was around 3 a.m. I got goosebumps. However, nothing else unsettling happened the rest of the night though. The following day, at nearly 3 a.m., in one room the light constantly lit up by itself. Every time we turned the light off, it would turn back on when we exited the room. As long as we stayed in the room, the light remained off, but as soon as we left, the light turned back on. After this happening for about 5 times, I turned off the light and I said, "Enough! I've had it with you." And the light remained off. 3 days later, at nearly 3 a.m. again, we heard a huge crack on the unit door and the door began to shake. We stared at each other. We checked the windows and we could see no one. The corridor lights remained off. There's a motion sensor. Some weird stuff happened later involving the death of a patient, but I cannot say more for obvious reasons. Everything I told you is true. I feel unsettled whilst working at night. I don't know if I offended some spirits, but it's really disturbing. Now, I spoke to the person who posted this, and after I was chatting with them, they advised me to add the following to the story. Yesterday I was working, and around 3 a.m. again, we heard a masculine voice saying, "Help me." Then all the computers in the unit started to go on and off. At the same time, a patient died in the ward in front of our ward. We learned about this after the incident. The second story. This is a story that happened to me 20 years ago. My mom was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1999. She was stage 4 and doctors didn't give her much hope to live past 3 to 6 months. They started her on an aggressive form of treatment, including Rituxan. She responded well and went into remission in December 2000. About 3 months later, she got a really bad sore throat and relapsed. The cancer was back and more aggressive than ever. Fast forward to October 2001. My mom didn't come to work at our shop one day and wouldn't answer the house phone. I went to see her after work and the door was locked. She finally came to the door and was confused and dizzy. I rushed her to the hospital where we were told her cancer had broken the blood-brain barrier. She was admitted and I was told she maybe had a few weeks to live. She lost her ability to speak to me, but she knew who I was. They tried an experimental treatment, and it worked for a few days, and she was speaking, and she was very aware of her surroundings and me. I knew it was going to be over soon, and she even said, "I've raised you right, and it's time for me to go." My dad had passed a few months before suddenly, and it was the worst year of my life. I came to see her the next day, and I could hear her talking in German, and I thought one of her friends was visiting. I came into the room and no one was there. I asked her, "Who are you talking to?" She said, "Papa," and started giggling. I said, "Yeah, okay," and sat with her. The next day she had a massive seizure and almost bit her tongue off. They had to place a stent in her mouth, then place her under anesthesia to stop the seizure. She passed at 5 a.m. on November 2, 2001. I was comforted by the excellent nurses in the hospice and told them she must have been losing it because she was talking to herself. The nurses looked at each other and said she did it all the time. She would have full-blown conversations with someone for hours on end. They asked her who she was talking to, and she said her dad, and that he'd been seeing her soon. Problem is, her dad was killed in World War II in Holland on November 1st, 1944. The nurses also told me they thought they heard a man's voice in her room at times, but when they entered, no one was there, and she had a huge smile on her face. I miss her dearly, but I know she's in a better place, free of that misery. I always get a bit melancholic around the time of her death anniversary. Writing this story makes me feel a bit better about the whole thing, and I hope it helps others cope during the holidays a little bit better. The third story. This was around 2005 when I was 15. I had science class immediately after lunch. I sat at the front of the class and the teacher put his coffee mug down on my desk as he was gesturing and writing on the board. As he backed away from the board, he bumped my desk and his mug tipped over and coffee went all over my desk and then spilled into my lap. I stood up and thankfully the coffee was only warm and not hot. Realizing what had happened, he apologized and went to get me some paper towels from near the sink. As he handed them to me, I looked down and my trousers were bone dry. His coffee mug was on my desk, filled with coffee, and the floor around me was dry. It was as if it never happened. My teacher and I looked at each other, wondering if we'd both seen what just happened. I still tapped the paper on my trousers as I was confused as to what had happened, expecting something to be absorbed. The paper was dry. It happened so quickly that the rest of the class didn't really notice what happened until it was all over. When I handed the paper towels back to him, he looked nervous. His face was white, and he said something about strange things happening to him before, like arriving at school earlier than when he'd left home. I feel like this third story would probably belong better on the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit rather than the paranormal one. However, quite interesting nonetheless. Again, thank you very much for the stories, they were lovely. And thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in my next episode.